Welcome to the second AVCN talk, and today I have two special guests with me. I have the CEO and founder of Avicanna, and as well as former NBA All-Star and now turned entrepreneur, advocate for the Black community, and as well as many others, Al Harrington. Thanks for coming north to Toronto and joining us up here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was easy for me. Toronto's one of my favorite cities, for sure.
That's nice to hear, because we hear a lot of times, especially in the basketball community, that Toronto's not the favorite place to be and a good place to go, but I appreciate that.
Yeah, definitely.
But we learn that's a misconception, right?
It is a misconception.
They like Toronto to go to party or
Right.
to spend time, but they don't like the taxes of Toronto in terms of playing here.
That's fair.
And customs.
And customs. And that's, yeah.
You made it here, so that's key. Al, before we start talking about re+PLAY and your venture into entrepreneurship, I want to touch on basketball and your role as an NBA player and kind of how you went through your whole career. And like myself, I witnessed a lot of players who had injuries as well as anxiety or depression, and often what was prescribed to them was first-line treatments like opioids, painkillers, sleeping pills, just to get through. And that was really masking a lot of injuries, right? And what is your perspective now that you've stepped away from the game and gone through your industry in the cannabis space, and looking back on your time, do you think there's a role for medical cannabis in that space?
Yeah, for sure. I think that, when I think about just my career and a lot of my friends, like, we always had a quest every year of trying to feel better. Right, so I think that's where that category is called recovery, right? We were always trying to figure out how we could go as hard as we could to play at our top abilities, but then be able to recover to do the same thing the next night, right? Because it's obviously a very taxing season, and it's just a grind, And for me, I was one of the guys that had a lot of injuries, and I've been prescribed a lot of pills. And for me, for 7 years straight, I took 2 anti-inflammatory in the morning and 1 at night. Just to be able to cope, just to be able to go out there and compete as hard as I could the next night. And when I looked at the side effects, and I did look at the side effects pretty early in the process, but I had to take that chance, right? I tell people all the time, for me and my family, I was first generational wealth. So I had to make a sacrifice in order to get me to where I am now, where, obviously, my family is in a way better position than we was when I actually started, right? So it's something that, I now think about, like, what if I had the option to have cannabis, to be able to deal with a lot of issues that I deal with, because the situation that I was in, for me and my family, I was first generational wealth. So, I had to make the sacrifice to be able to put my family in the position that they're in now, but at the same time, I had to risk my health. Right, because obviously the side effects are real, and I always say, like, if there are some things that are coming in the future, it's in the future, you know what I mean? Because I definitely already done the harm. But when I think about with cannabis, especially since I've been retired and that I've pretty much been able to, to manage all of my pain and any issues that I have with cannabis, whether it's through, a re+PLAY topical or whether it's through, Viola product that I use to calm myself down, to make myself feel better. You know what I'm saying? I wish I had that access as a professional athlete, and that's why I'm advocating so hard, for this to be accepted in all major sports, so that players just have it as an option. I'm not gonna say that cannabis is gonna make everything feel better, you know what I mean? I think that there is some scenarios, major surgeries, that you do need those, but you can wean yourself off of it and then be able to incorporate cannabis, which is obviously a way safer option.
Yeah, and even when you think back to the last Olympics, we had an amazing American athlete that used cannabis for anxiety and depression and was disqualified because of the testing.
Right.
And finally in 2021-2022 season, the NBA decided to stop the testing on cannabis. But that's obviously still not a step fully forward, because the stigma around cannabis is there. Where do you think we can go with that for athletes?
Well, I think that, to your point about the NBA, I think that it's a business thing, is the only, because, at the end of the day, obviously the NBA is very, very progressive, right? They've always been the most progressive, but on this stance, they haven't been, right? And I firmly believe that it's because it's a business negotiating chip, because collective bargaining is coming up, and I'm sure, like, the owners are gonna say, okay, if you want cannabis, you gotta give us this. But I think that in this next collective bargaining agreement, it will be addressed. I think players will have access to it, just like, you know, all the other major sports. And hopefully then they can start to endorse it and stuff like that. Because, you know, I know a lot of players that are at the tip top of the game that are cannabis users, and they would love to be open about it, you know, because, you know, obviously they use it, you know, for, I think, pain management, but they also use it for, you know, to be able to just deal and cope with a lot of the pressure that we deal with as athletes, right? Most people think that because we're professional athletes, we're Superman, we don't have no issues. But in the great words of Biggie Smalls, he said, more money, more problems. And it's just, and that's very, very true, you know? So it's like, how do guys cope with that? You know, your options that are readily available to you are alcohol, right? Alcohol is obviously very proven to know no medicinal benefits, and obviously it's gonna usually push you to making a bad decision, right? You know, the pills, right? We all know that's a slippery slope, and where, you know, a lot of people have like obviously lost their lives, you know what I'm saying? That's the dangers of it, right? So we just feel like cannabis should just be available as an option, and I think it's coming very sooner than later.
Yeah, and Aras here in Canada, we have medical cannabis available, and we're doing a lot of studies around pain and symptom management. Do you want to talk a little bit about that and how it fits into this context too?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we have the legality here to do the research, which has been great. This is part of what we do together as well. And one of the most important things of the legality and the fact that we could do the work is we can now differentiate the kind of products that are for different needs, right? And I think the misconception is all the benefits of cannabis are inhaled, right? And maybe that's not the case. And maybe for someone that wants, you know, aid in terms of anxiety or stress, we need a little bit of THC. Maybe that's inhaled, maybe that's through an oral product, but something like our re+PLAY product, the topical, like that shouldn't be categorized as cannabis, in my opinion. It's a CBD, you know, anti-inflammatory topical, right? And that could reduce potentially a lot of the products that you had to take back in the day, right? So we're seeing obviously efficacy. The signals are very real in terms of the support it has for various indications, but the major ones is like the comorbidities, the sleep, the anxiety, and all of these things. So yeah, it could be a Viola product, it could be a re+PLAY product. And if we go towards allowing all of these, then we can go towards separating them, educating people, right? We've had instances where we've had dermatology, you know, patients, children, pediatric dermatology patients, and their parents have heard potentially CBD topical could help a rare skin disease, and they thought the solution is potentially for the kid to smoke. Because they're making that association, oh, cannabis has to be inhaled. And I think that's because of the stigma, we haven't had an opportunity to really educate people.
And that's why for me it was so important, like, to do this partnership with you guys because of the research, to your point, right? And I've always been saying to people for the last probably 7 years, right? Saying like the industry has evolved so far past just smoking cannabis. You know, there's so many different products that now can be created because of this research that is available, right? And because obviously we did a partnership with a company that's in a federally legal, you know what I'm saying, situation. You know what I mean? And that's been very, very helpful. And it just gives the product credibility, right? When we can say like, this was something that's been worked on for years. And we know we took our time and carefully baked this product, you know, specifically for you and the things that you deal with. And, you know, because of that, you know, I feel like we will definitely be able to move mountains in the industry.
And I think I'm particularly excited about the re+PLAY brand launching here because as a former athlete, now I know athletes that are using products where it's a topical, but they're worried about there being residual THC, right? And I think what you guys have done here with re+PLAY provides an opportunity to take something that has some efficacy, but they're safe on that back end in terms of testing, especially when it comes to Olympic athletes or leagues that still have the THC testing in their mandate. Aras, when it comes to the formulations, it's something that we've done for years now at Avicanna. What makes Avicanna's partnership with re+PLAY different, and what makes these products so different in contrast to the majority of those out there?
I think that's a great question. First is the technology, right? The idea is to get the cannabinoids into the muscles and joints, and we wanted to make sure we had a real transdermal technology. So I think that's the basis. But in terms of what the end product ended up being was a lot of the information came from Al and the guys. He knows what an athlete needed. He understands their needs better than anyone else. You know, I think it's incredible for someone to be at that professional level for 16 years. So the aches, the pains, the things that we, as an R&D company, know about the formulation technology, we don't know about the needs, right? So when you combine the two, I think we've done a great job of putting together products that are going to be very functional, they're going to be efficacious. I think the involvement with Al, the team, and the NBA Players Association, not having THC, in the formulations makes it bulletproof and foolproof for athletes. I think those are key, and those are major differentiation factors. And the products will work, and the products are designed to do particular things, right? Like a muscle rub is much more intense. It's more of a muscle recovery product. Foot and ankle, something that I would have never come up with, right? That's him all day, right?
Yeah.
But to introduce dermatological benefits plus anti-inflammatory pain type of benefits. So it's been a great collaboration. That's how we started our relationship. Of course, we're now working together with Viola in Canada as well. But I'm very excited about the products. I'm very excited what Al can advocate for his brand and what he can do in terms of bringing major associations and leagues in. And we're there to back them up in terms of the substance and the data behind the scenes, right? So.
Al, how does it feel to have a brand now that's globally, 2 brands, Viola and re+PLAY, right? In all North America.
Yeah, it came a long way, but, obviously big shout out to the Avicanna team. Made it all possible, made it possible like that. A lot of times when you do partnerships like this, it takes a very, very long time. But, you guys have done an unbelievable job in, having unbelievable foundation and structure around it that we were able to pull it off. And pretty much, after all the feedback that I've been getting since I've been up here, it's been all very super positive, And, obviously that means a lot. This brand, both brands obviously mean a lot to me. One is with my grandmother's name on it, so obviously that's near and dear to my heart. And then re+PLAY obviously is something that, I'm very passionate about because I was one of those guys in the locker room, and I knew, and I know the mindset of those guys and how, how much they just want to feel better, right? So they can continue to play the game that they love at the highest level. And we're now providing products for that to be able to happen. And, when I think about legacy, if we could say that that's one of the marks that we left is that people had better lives because of the products that we created, that's something that I'm willing to go all in on. I need to make that happen. And I think that, like I said, with this partnership and all the research and the way that we can put these products together, with all these different formulations and stuff like that could be so specific to people's needs. And like I said, it's just a game changer in the industry.
I think what's been particularly awesome to see as a former athlete and like yourself, you see many athletes who have an amazing platform that often don't go out there, go back into the community and have an impact. And what you've done over the last decade now is be involved actively in your community, promoting diversity and creating opportunities for other Black and Brown community members to create businesses. Do you want to talk about how important that is for you? And then we'll shift to Aras, who also, as a minority representation, is also doing the same with Avicanna.
Yeah, obviously it's very important, because I come from that community and I understand that there aren't a lot of opportunities, right? Most people say that, from our community, like you either got to play ball or be a rapper, right, to get out, right? And a lot of times that's true, and so now it's like, okay, if you were blessed to be able to be one of those, and what do you do now? How do you pull other people up? And that's always been a focus of mine. I think it's just because of my upbringing. Like my family's always had that mindset of like, it takes a village to be successful. So at the end of the day, the fact that my mom was the mom to my other friends and vice versa, it's just one of those things that's kind of just inside of me of just like wanting to see people do well. And if I can be impactful in any shape, form, or fashion, I should do that. It's almost like my duty to give back, and I take that, with the game of basketball in life, from being an entrepreneur. I think that the knowledge that we learn, we have to give it back in order to see the next generation rise above us. It's like I look at even the basketball, a lot of veteran, older guys, they say upset when we see these guys with these contracts and all. That's not the truth. We're happy to see it because all of the work that we're putting in collectively is making everybody better, making everybody's situations better. And, that's something that I'm really passionate about. I want to see others do well. And, from an entrepreneur standpoint, it's all education. Right, I think about when I was young, growing up in Jersey, and Jersey City was something that was considered like a dump. right? But if I would have known that, waterfront property is going to be through the roof value, as a rookie, I would have bought some of that land where now there's all kind of skyscrapers there. But it was just, I didn't have the education. Nobody was able to sit there and kind of give me a tutorial about real estate and how things change and how one little stadium could build a whole community. You know what I mean? So these are things that, like I said, that because now that I know that and learned that, that's something that now I have to talk about to other guys. And I'm just using real estate as an example because there's so many, I have a very diverse portfolio of investments. And obviously this cannabis one is obviously a huge part of my portfolio. But, even with that, the Harrington Institute, I just feel like, a lot of people from our community don't take advantage of these opportunities from a social equity standpoint, things because they just don't know about it. They're still, in their communities, cannabis is still being policed the same way. You know what I'm saying? I know for a fact that's the truth, So if you see that, then it's like it's a dispensary down the street. It's like, it don't add up, right? I'm gonna stay completely away from that, right? So we have to continue to educate and, we have to educate about the industry. We have to educate about our products. Education is very, very key in order for us to move forward in any way, and especially as minorities in social equity settings.
And RAS as a minority representation, what were some of the challenges that you experienced here, and now why is it exciting for you to partner with someone like Al who's doing so much for the community?
For me, I think it's important that we acknowledge that this is the beginning of an industry, right? And there's an opportunity to build, to carve out, where it's not necessarily the pathway you would have in a more formed industry, a more mature one like banking or insurance, etc. So this is the beginning, and I think people of color, people of different ethnicities, people from different walks of life have an opportunity to do something in this industry because it's the beginning. And to Al's point, a lot of the minority community, especially in the United States and Canada, have suffered through the illegal aspects of cannabis. And when you look at the first few years of the cannabis industry, we didn't see any of them in power. We didn't see any of them as CEOs or owners. And in my opinion, I think the first few years of this industry has been hijacked by investment bankers and mining sector executives in Canada, unfortunately, and the outcome wasn't very good for the sector. But there is real companies there. There's real CEOs, and there's real companies that are building and doing real things, and I think now you're seeing that filtration. So for me, it's been extremely important to ensure that we build this industry and we build our companies with that in mind and trying to be equitable in terms of even management, but being diverse. And more importantly for me is to say this is not just diversity washing or getting participation, but ownership. And I heard you say that yesterday, and that's very important. We're both founding CEOs, right? We're not here, contributing. We're here building and owning, and I think that's the message. There's a lot of smaller firms that can be built, ancillary companies, and people can own things, and I think that's a really unique opportunity. For us, our vision, our mission from the beginning for Avicanna has been the patients, right? So I would say patients and getting education to patients and now getting education to the consumers about benefits of cannabis has been our mission. But Al's mission, what he's done with Viola, has been a huge inspiration for me. I was able to justify also to my board, to our team, because we're such a patient-centric medical and R&D company, we're going to endorse and support Viola because we believe in his vision, something that we want to expand. And that was very special to me and very important to me. And Al knows how much we protect the brand, how much we care about it. So it's been a great journey so far, and I still think we're in a first inning, second inning of this industry. It's been a tough one with a lot of growing pains, but I think there is opportunities there, and we have opportunity to make a difference. We have opportunity to own. I think that's the key.
Yeah. And what are some of these challenges that we face in the industry? Like, where do we go from here? How do we make the industry better? And whether it's from a growth perspective or increasing diversity, or to even getting more standardized medical products on the market. Let's start with you, Ras.
I think first and foremost, you have to separate, for me, the medical versus the lifestyle or consumer. And I think Al's done a good job. re+PLAY is a medical recovery product, right? Viola is a consumer product. It's more of a lifestyle product. And they will have very different standards. Like when we produce re+PLAY, where we do the R&D, the way we test it to make sure it's THC-free, we feel much more comfortable, and we've done that with our medical products. So in the beginning, everyone was trying to be everything to everyone, and nobody did a good job, right?
Period.
End of story. And now I think people are starting to specialize, and companies are starting to specialize, which is important. I think that that's a critical factor in terms of the success and the future of this industry. And I think that's going to set the foundation for people to be very good at what they do and give the right products to the right people. So I think that's one of the bigger issues. A lot of people were, again, I say hijacked the industry. They were just trying to make quick money where there was, and there is, real companies. So I think that filtering needed to happen. It was painful for people. I know a lot of investors lost a lot of money, and I think the reality is the sector is very real. Canada is what, a $4 or $5 billion, federally approved market. If you have a $4 or $5 billion market and nobody's making money, the problem is not the industry. The problem is the operations and the companies, right? And U.S. has different restrictions, of course, in terms of the non-federalization, but at least American companies know how to make money, right? We're seeing we see better performance there. So I think it's just all had to happen in terms of the filtering, the separation, getting, the bad operators out. But I do feel that the future of this industry is, again, separated and specialized.
Al, do you feel the same way, or?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything that Ross said. I just think that, simply put, I just think the industry has to just continue to evolve and move forward, but learn from its past mistakes. I mean, we are pioneering an industry, right? And I think that if you look at all the industries before, rice, sugar, cotton, whatever, I'm sure they had the same kind of issues, right? We're working towards a goal, right? And I think that if we continue to work together, I think that will be the key to kind of getting over that hump. I think that the industry as a whole needs this camaraderie, right? And that's what I try to push, right? Is like, I'm not in competition with you, really. I'm not. It's like we are fighting. We're fighting obviously government. We're fighting a lot of those different things because I always feel like the government doesn't really understand entrepreneurship a lot of times because different between, here, but like in the US, it's difficult sometimes to make money because of a lot of the taxes and different things like that. And they're not understanding that they're running a lot of, customers to the black market because a lot of these different things that are in place. Right, so I just think that it's collectively we're going to have to move the industry forward, and I honestly believe that the government is going to have to play a major part in it, right? Because, until we get federal, legalization where we have access to banking and just, more strategic capital, it's just going to be kind of stuck in this little bit of a rut. And I believe that because the government is the one that's going to benefit the most, I think that they should be mostly invested in trying to make sure that the programs and that the industry moves forward in the right way. And I think that until they start to listen to people like myself and Araz, the people that are in the trenches that are actually doing it every day and understand the impact of a lot of these decisions that are being made, we're just going to be in this, tough little spot. But, I think that things are changing. This industry is here to stay. I think the pandemic happening and cannabis being deemed essential, to me, stamped it, right? It's not going anywhere. It's just, how is it going to look when we get to the other side?
It's kind of interesting though, right? We're here in Canada and other countries in the world, and you're in the States, and we can leverage off each other and learn from each other, because in the States you have brands, you have much more marketing opportunities, so you have people that can understand what is this exact product for. Whereas here in Canada, we have to be very sensitive of what we say because we're not allowed to say anything. So it's been interesting to see, even you look at the re+PLAY bottle, what you can say in the States versus Canada, and I think we can learn from each other on where
and we can do
go.
the research, right? So it's vice versa. I think what the U.S. federal legalization has been a huge, obviously, bottleneck, especially from an American's perspective. And I always joke, for Americans, they think the rest of the world doesn't exist, right? U.S. is not federally legal, therefore cannabis is never going to happen. Right. The reality is we've been to 16 countries with cannabis products, right? And I think that's important to note that, yes, the U.S. has lagged, but the rest of the world is evolving, and it's generally towards CBD and medical use, which is, I think, quite interesting, right? And I think that's part of the evolution, is that there is a big market out there once this thing gets stabilized and people actually do what they're supposed to do with their companies and products. But the fact that U.S. hasn't legalized, I think, has limited our access to, for example, funding that as a biotech company we should probably have access to, right? Like, we're doing the right research, we're showing signals. if this was a non-cannabinoid based company or products, what we do now, we should have access to way more capital. Correct. So the fact that US isn't legal, yes, there's limitations for, you know, the state, multi-state operators and banking and all these things that are everyday, you know, discussions, but also for the research and medical companies, right? Because the big funds, the big pharma companies, they're still not touching it. All right. Right. And so, but again, that's an opportunity.
Yeah, and it comes back to the stigma, right, around cannabis and what it is, and people not understanding what it does, and that the safety profile overall of cannabis is much better than opioids, and that's been proven time and time again. And it'll take, like both of you have talked about, the education piece to get out there to patients, to just regular consumers, and then also to healthcare providers and hospitals and institutions. And I think until there is federal legalization, there'll always be this kind of black dot over it.
You know, I'm in that different lane where, like, honestly, like with my kids, being around cannabis is so normal.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like my 4-year-old knows the difference in the smells of weed. He knows it smells of, he knows what OG smells like. He knows what runts smell like. You know what I mean? He knows what gelato smells like. You know what I'm saying? So it's just different times, right? And it's like, you know, and I think that, you know, when you take away the stigma, right, it becomes a normal conversation, right? And I just rather, and I always say this, like, even as parenting, like, I'd rather have the conversation with my kid than someone else. Even their teacher. Like, I want to control the narrative as much as I can, you know? So that's the way I choose to raise my kids. And, you know, and to that point, right, cannabis will be such a normal thing for them. It's going to be the same way for us growing up with liquor in the cabinet, right? Yeah. We know not to touch it until we're 18 years old, right?
Or when the parents leave.
Right, but some touch it, some don't. But you understand what I'm saying? But we've always, but it was a normal thing. It wasn't something so like, oh my God, that's how cannabis has been, right? So I feel like, once again, our generation, since we are open to it, we have to now start to educate and let kids know and let the people underneath us know, because the older people, you can't change their minds, right? A lot of times, you know, I feel like a lot of people, it's just a level of ignorance that they don't even want it, because if you, to your point earlier, like if you're a doctor and you're not even willing to consider it, then you're not doing your job. Yeah. You know, your job is to always look for a better option.
And to do no harm.
To do no harm. That's your job, right? So if you choose not to do that, then you're just being ignorant, you know? And for me, I've learned that, you know, in my journey, because I do a lot of advocating and stuff like that, is just some people just not gonna be able to change their mind. Yeah. They're just stuck in their way. So I'm not gonna waste my time on somebody that's not willing to grow and I'm rather go talk to you if you're more open to receiving the information. And that's what we gotta do. And I think that, you know, continue to do things like this, you know, also understanding the times we live in now. People want information that fast. They want it in 30 seconds. They don't want to sit and listen to 30 minutes of somebody talking. You know, we have to figure out who are those messengers, who are those people that can deliver that message. I know I'm one of them, you know, you're one of them, you know, and it's all different demographics of people that we talk to. But we have to continue to own these messages and own them in and be able to explain ourselves in 60 seconds. You know what I mean? That's some of the stuff that I work on constantly now, is like, you know, trying to get my point across quick so people can like get it, understand it, or at least open their mind enough to make them want to learn a little bit more about it, you know? And that's what we're doing, you know? And I always say, like, you know, especially in this industry, because of the medicinal benefits, we're doing God's work. You know, God put this plant here on this earth for a reason. Right now, we're the ones that are unlocking how magnificent and unbelievable and dynamic it is. You know, I talk about hemp, you know, hemp has 2,300 use cases. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's crazy when you think about like something that has been demonized and supposed to be so bad for you, but has 2,300 use cases that can make all of our lives better, you know? So we got to just continue to do that, and we got to keep advocating and continue, like I said, to make our message better and better and better and be able to get it off quick. And I think that, you know, people are coming around, and like I said, the older generation, if they knock on, it's okay, it's not for them, right? But I think that our generation and down, I think it's definitely been more open-minded to it, and you know, we just got to keep pushing it forward. Just the beginning. We're in the beginning stages of something, and they're gonna write books about us, bro. Which is kind of dope. You know what I mean? I don't know how. I mean, I know books are going away, but they're gonna be some digital something about us, about what we've been able to do, and you know, that's gonna be pretty cool.
Well, I think on that note, that's a great space to end, and a great positive note forward. And thank you, Al, for coming up to Canada, and no hopefully have another few great days here, and hopefully we'll get you back soon enough.
For sure, I'll be back.